Nice. So thanks very much for coming. I'm Mark Rogers. I'm the host of tonight's event from Grounded AI. You'll hear a little bit more about us later. And also I'm the organizer of Cambridge AI, which is the meetup that organizes this group. Thanks very much for coming. And I'd like in particular to thank our hosts at Fora for this amazing venue that they've donated for this event. So thanks very much to Reese, Ella, Nicola, and the team at Fora for hosting this event. Reese, do you want to just say a brief word about Fora?
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Folgate. This is just one of 64 Fora locations we have in London alone. We have 4 around the UK, 1 in Cambridge. Obviously, we've got Reading, Leeds, and Bristol, and we have a further 5 in Germany. We are the largest flexible workspace provider in London, so for offices, event spaces, meeting rooms. If you guys need anything, we're always here. And as a big thank you for you coming down tonight, Mark will send out a Fora complimentary day pass. So if you guys have any needs, if you're coming into London or whatever, please just come in. Our team will help you out. There's no pressure on anything. Just enjoy our spaces. Apart from that, have an incredible evening. Enjoy the bar. I know that's got to go as well from Mark. And just enjoy the talks. Thank you.
And I'd just like to introduce Helen King, our co-organizer of this event.
Hi, so I'm Helen King. Really warm welcome and thanks for coming on this really lovely evening. I'm the co-organizer of the AI and Publishing Collective, which is a London-based meetup. So if you want to join our group, come to future events, please go there and join. And once again, thanks for coming.
So we're going to talk about Grounded in a bit more detail later, but Grounded AI is a business that is specialized on fact-checking for academic publishing. We are a bootstrapped, self-funded company, and we'll tell you a little bit more about what we're up to as one of the presentations later on tonight. In the meantime, thank you for our sponsors. So Rebecca and Rob have laid on the food and drink for us tonight. They're from RedTech Recruitment.
Cool, thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. We're excited to be the sponsors for this evening. So yeah, we are RedTech. We are a 5-star rated recruitment agency. We were founded originally actually to connect high caliber kind of graduates through to PhDs into tech companies. And we expanded in 2023 to actually include experienced hires. We realized a lot of people were kind of circling back to us when they were looking for their next role. We now operate across the UK and more recently the USA as well. So if anyone is hiring, do come and speak to us. Also, we do lots with DE&I. It's something that I've got a lot of experience in. And also, if you want some client or candidate advice, we do absolutely loads on our TikTok and our Instagram. So do drop us a follow if you are currently looking for a job. And yeah, be keen to speak to anyone afterwards as well. Thank you.
So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Ivy Cavendish. So Ivy is the founder and former CEO of Toowrite, a writing tool for researchers. And Toowrite was acquired by Springer Nature in 2022. And Ivy is now Director of Innovation at Springer Nature. So thanks very much, Ivy.
Hi everyone, it's great to be here. Apologies for the lack of slides. I was going to make you all a deck to go alongside this talk, but unfortunately a thunderstorm had other plans. Spent the last couple of days dealing with floods and bits of roof. But anyway, for those of you who I haven't met yet, I'm Ivy Cavendish. I'm the Director of Innovation at Springer Nature, which means, essentially I spend my days identifying problems and opportunities in the research ecosystem and then building solutions to meet them. Before that, I was the founder and CEO of Toowrite, a platform that helped researchers write faster and with less stress using quite unfashionably psychology instead of AI. So I think it's fair to say that I spent a fair amount of time thinking about how we solve problems in our research community and what tools we choose to solve them with. And that brings me to today's topic, how to decide if AI is the right tool for the job. Now, I don't think I need to convince anyone here that AI is having a bit of a moment. It's exciting, it's powerful, and it's everywhere. But with that excitement comes a kind of, I don't know, a gravitational pull, a temptation to throw AI at every problem we see. Got a bottleneck? AI. Got a backlog? AI. Got a vague sense of inefficiency? You guessed it, AI. But here's the thing. Just because we can use AI doesn't mean we should. Sometimes AI is exactly what's needed. Sometimes it's a distraction, or worse, a complication. And the real challenge isn't just building with AI, it's knowing when not to. So in this, yeah, hair getting in the way. So let's dive in. I'd like to start with an example from my own experience building Toowrite, a grassroots solution for researchers that was ultimately acquired by Springer Nature. Now, I'll start at the beginning just to give a little bit of context. Now, it was 2019 when all this started. I was writing a PhD in English literature, and my partner was writing his own in computational biology. We were co-working one day, and like many scientists have found, he was getting incredibly frustrated with the process of writing up. He was trying to condense this big tangle of research that he'd performed over 3 years, all the experiments and the twists and the turns, the wrong turns, the right turns, all of it, into what eventually needed to be this incredibly fluid and clean piece of prose with all the information laid out in black and white. And he was feeling pretty down about it all. I mean, he had worked so hard over the course of those 3 years. This write-up, it should have felt like a victory lap, but instead, it was just another hurdle to overcome. And after 6 months, he only had 5,000 words down, and they weren't of publishable quality. Pretty soon, his time and his funding started to run out, which brings us to that day, the day we were co-working. Now, he was supposed to be writing his literature review, and he was starting, as we all do, with 50 tabs open and a blank document open on the screen, notes scattered everywhere. And after a couple hours of typing and backspacing, all I heard were just fists slamming down onto the desk with him saying, "I don't know how to do this. How are you even supposed to write a literature review?" To which I replied, "Oh, well, that's easy. You're writing a chronological overview, right? Well, first you start with how the field began, what came before, why was it needed, any major papers that signal the beginning of the field," and on I went, listing off all the questions that should be answered in order of answering. And anyway, I finished my rambling, and he just looks at me and says, "Well, of course it sounds easy when you say it like that." So I wrote it down into a visual timeline, a narrative structure made up of sprints, formed of questions and bite-sized teaching modules. And I mean, I was hopeful. I handed it over thinking, it can't hurt, right? Well, 25 working hours later, he came back having written 15,000 words, which later passed at Viva. And well, after several more tests with similar results, that was it for us. That was the day we knew that we wanted to make this method accessible to everyone. And so we formed a startup, venture capital backed, and started the process of turning this stack of papers into a digital platform that could be accessed by any scientist anywhere in the world. But to do that, we needed to expand our capabilities to include more disciplines, more types of papers, more publishers. And to do that, we needed to segment all this data and create an algorithm powerful enough for the job. And so we asked ourselves the question, is AI the right tool for the job? And remember, Algie was my co-founder in this venture, and he's a very senior AI developer. So we had the capabilities to use AI. We had nothing of that nature stopping us. But you know what? Ultimately, we decided not to. Not a single drop. Sounds odd, right? You'd think data segmentation of thousands of research papers forming unique and complex algorithms, that sounds right up AI's street, right? As it turns out, not. We very quickly realized that the cost of me building this thing pretty much on my own, because, that was the whole point of this thing. Algie continuing to be a working scientist, a full research role. Anyway, the resource cost me building this thing manually from scratch was actually lower than what we needed to overcome the shortcomings of the large language models at the time. They couldn't segment the data or identify the variables accurately enough. They couldn't create a user-friendly decision tree without masses of supervision. So I did it myself. Stacks of papers, highlighters, post-it notes. Actually, funny story about the post-it notes. I'm such a visual person, and the decision tree we needed to power Toowrite was so large, I made a kind of walk-in decision tree using post-it notes across the walls of our rental, which ultimately was a bit of an oopsie because it took the cheap landlord paint off the walls and cost us our deposit. Whoops. Anyway, all this to say is, we had a use case for AI that seemed like an obvious fit. But once we dug a little deeper, we quickly found that it wasn't the right tool for the job. So, what are the best practices for making this decision? What questions do we need to be asking? It was at this point in the PowerPoint, I was going to flick to the next slide, and it was going to read, is AI the right tool? The questions we need to ask. So keep that in your mind. So let's say you've identified a problem. You've got a clear sense of a pain point, and you're starting to think about how to solve it. The temptation, of course, is to reach straight for AI. But before you do, I want to offer a framework, a set of questions that I believe every team should ask themselves before deciding whether AI is the right tool for the job. And these aren't just technical questions. They're strategic, experiential, operational, and they're essential if we want to build solutions that are not just clever, but genuinely useful, sustainable, and responsible. So let's walk through them. 1. Does AI actually solve the problem? This is the most fundamental question, yet it's the one we skip over most often. AI is great at certain things: pattern recognition, prediction, language generation, classification. But not every problem it needs these things. Sometimes the best solution is just a better workflow or a clearer interface. As I quite distinctly remember saying when building Toowrite, you don't need to build the Great Wall of China where a picket fence will do. So before you start building, ask, what exactly is the problem we're solving? And is AI uniquely suited to solve it? If the answer is no, or even maybe, it's worth pausing, because once you commit to AI, you're also committing to a whole set of complexities that might not be necessary. So the second question is, do we have the right data? I don't think I really need to say this out loud in this room, but here we go anyway. AI is only as good as the data it's trained on, and prompting is only as effective as the context you provide. If you don't have high-quality representative data, or if the data doesn't exist at all, then your AI-based solution is going to struggle. For example, with Toowrite, the critical issue we had when it came to the idea of training the model was that there weren't enough gold standard papers that followed our perfect formula of information. They all had at least a couple flaws, and the time it would have taken to Frankenstein these papers into the correct formula would have been completely wild, not worth it, also not allowed. So ask yourself, do we have the data we need? Is it clean? Is it complete? Do we have enough gold standard examples to show our model? And if not, what would it take to get it? Because without the right data, even the most sophisticated model is just guessing. Question number 3, is it scalable? Let's say you've built a prototype. It works beautifully on a small data set or in a controlled environment. That's great. But can it scale? And when I say scale, I mean, can it scale technically, and can it scale with a wider spectrum of use cases, by which I mean, can it survive users in all their glory? Because if there's one thing we all know as product people, users will find a way to break your stuff. They won't just politely click on a button once. No, they'll click on it 20 times, generating things over and over and over again, spending 20 times the number of credits you've allotted in your financial modeling. So all of this is to say, as you scale, more things will get broken, more things will need to be changed, and your model is going to have to be able to either cope with that itself as an in-baked capacity or be easily fine-tuned to new edge cases. AI systems often require significant computational resources, especially if they're running interference in real time. That can get expensive fast. And if your solution relies on fine-tuning or retraining models regularly, the cost, particularly financial, can spiral. So ask, can this solution scale to meet real-world demand? And if it can't, what are the trade-offs? Is AI genuinely the right tool for the job? That brings me to question 4. What's the cost-benefit balance? This one's simple but crucial. AI is rarely cheap, even if it's just prompting. Between infrastructure, licensing, development, the cognitive load of ongoing maintenance. These costs can add up quickly. So you need to weigh these costs against the benefit. Is the AI component of your solution delivering enough value to justify the investment? Could we achieve similar outcomes with a simpler, cheaper approach? How about a nice decision tree? Yeah? Sometimes the answer is yes, AI is worth it, but sometimes a good old-fashioned rules-based system will do the job just as well for a fraction of the cost. Number 5, and this one's a really important one. Does it enhance the user experience or complicate it? This is one of my personal bugbears because we've all had that experience, right? You're trying to get help on a website. Instead of a human or a clear FAQ, you get a chatbot, and not a helpful one. A chatbot that loops you in circles, misunderstands your questions, and refuses to escalate. So when you're designing an AI-powered solution, ask, is this making the user's life easier? Is it intuitive, responsive, and genuinely helpful? Or are we just adding complexity for the sake of it? Because if your AI makes things harder, your users will notice, and they won't thank you for it, and they certainly won't pay you for it. Question number 6. Have we considered the security implications? AI introduces a whole new layer of ethical and security concerns. Are we introducing bias? Are we transparent about what this tool can achieve? Are we protecting user data? Are we giving users meaningful control over how they use AI? Is there maybe an opportunity for something like a toggle in your solution that gives users the ability to say, no, I'd like to use this tool in manual mode with no AI assistance? These aren't just compliance questions, they're trust questions. And in a world where trust is increasingly hard to earn, they matter more than ever. So ask, what are the risks? How are we mitigating them? And are we being honest with our users about what this system can and can't do? Now, final question number 7 asks, is it technically and operationally feasible and maintainable in the long term? It's one thing to build a proof of concept. It's another to build a robust, production-ready system that can be maintained over time. AI systems can be brittle. They can break in unexpected ways. They often require ongoing tuning, monitoring, and retraining. And I know it sounds like I'm repeating myself, but stay with me. I'm leading up to something. If you're relying on third-party models like ChatGPT, you're also at the mercy of their update cycles, which brings me to one of the most pressing issues we're seeing right now. Right now, we're seeing a wave of startups, especially in the generative AI space, running into a serious problem. They've built their entire product around a specific version of a model like GPT-4. They fine-tuned their prompt chains, built workflows around specific behaviors, and then the model changed. Suddenly, their product doesn't work the way it used to. The outputs are different, the reliability is gone, and because they don't control the model, they can't fix it. This is a huge risk. If your solution depends on a black box model that you don't own and that can change at any time, you need to plan for that. You need to ask, what happens when the model updates? Because it will. Do we have a fallback? Can we adapt quickly? Because if you can't, you're building on sand. And I'm not just talking to the startup founders or the product builders in the room. I'm also talking to the people who are building internal tools based on third-party controlled models too. What happens to when your blog post writing tool that you use for clients, what happens to that when the model updates and the output changes? You've changed the financial model for that service based on this new, more efficient internal process. What happens when you can't control the quality of the output from that tool? Have you budgeted time to scramble to fix it? Do you still have the team members that can jump in to help? Food for thought. Anyway, bring it all together. So, to recap, before you decide to use AI, I'd like you to ask yourself, does it actually solve the problem? Do we have the right data? Can it scale? Is the cost worth the benefit? Does it enhance the user experience? And are we being ethical and secure? Is it technically feasible and maintainable? And is it viable in the long term? These questions aren't there to slow you down. They're there to make sure you're building something that lasts, something that works, that helps, and that earns the trust of the people it's meant to serve. Because in the end, innovation isn't about the flashiest tool. It's about solving the right problem in the right way for the right reasons. And sometimes that means using AI. And sometimes it means knowing when not to. Thank you.
So we have time for a couple of questions. Does anybody have a question for Ivy?
What would you recommend people do about quality assurance for AI tools in their companies?
So quality assurance starts with testing, and it's testing edge cases. One of the most fun weeks we had with Toowrite was going to all of our researcher friends and saying, break it. Daring them to break it, daring them to find edge cases that we hadn't accounted for. And that's where you start, really, just testing over and over and over again, and not just before you launch, frequently. It's because so many people, they launch products and they go, okay, well, it's out into the world. Next one. And they don't continually test. They wait for a customer or a user to say, hey, there's a problem. Don't let them do that. Keep testing.
Ivy, thank you very much indeed. So I'd just like to go to our next presenters, Richard Bennett and Nick Morley. Richard is Hum's Chief Growth Officer with 25 years of sales and marketing experience with both established publishing brands and research technology startups. Richard leads Hum's mission of bringing data and frontier AI to solve the challenges of publishers, societies, and media organizations. Nick is a scientist by training, software engineer by trade, studied neurosciences at Nottingham and Oxford, and has followed a career developing life science solutions for the pharmaceutical industry, and is now co-founder of Grounded AI, developing AI-enabled workflows and products. So take it away.
Thank you, Matt. And it's lovely to be here. Thank you for having us. We're going to do a two-hander on this one, mainly because the product we're going to talk about today is a collaboration between both Hum and Grounded AI. For those who don't know Hum is a technology company. We do apply AI, and we utilize AI, following on from Ivy's talk, in a number of different use cases, mostly to solve the challenges and create opportunities for content-rich organizations such as academic publishers and B2B publishers. I'm going to go through a scenario and actually share with you a live demo after this, but we're going to kind of bridge on a product that's associated with academic journal publishing. So for those of you who do or maybe not know academic journal publishing, it's built on a bedrock of peer review. So peer review and editorial review is the key kind of tenet of the quality and the structure of academic journal publishing. It does a number of different things. That process does a structural process to be able to assess a manuscript and be able to, it ensures that it is viable and it is congruent with the understanding and interests of the community it serves. It also serves a number of different kind of quality control steps. And this is where we'll go into the tool and where we're starting to push on. So it's doing, feedback from peer group to be able to improve the manuscripts. It's being able to assess the validity of that research. And it's the key tenet to actually provision of ensuring that quality is kept in the process, and the fact that, bad research isn't published. There are two significant challenges that are facing academic publishers at the moment. There is one which is scale. The first one is really that there's an exponential growth in the level of submissions that are coming in. So that is far outstripping the researcher market and the researchers that are there and have been implemented to be able to assess that research. The second part is that there's a growing level of fraud in the system. So there are both not just nonsensical papers that are coming into the system, but there are actually incredibly sophisticated, constructed pieces of research that look incredibly valid, and those are flooding into the system. And actually, we've got generally a double-hander on this as far as the actual scale and the fraud is going hand in hand. And what you're creating is an unsustainable system that humans can keep up with. But in relation to the idea of responsible AI, I think, so the way that we're approaching this challenge and we're going to talk about Alchemist Review in this case, we are looking at ways of being able to implement AI to be able to extract knowledge and understanding and make an assessments of different aspects of the manuscript to be able to aid the human review process. So this isn't, we're going to check it all out. We're going to replace it with AI, but we do believe that we can be able to create a better and more efficient process. So we're trying to reduce decision time. So can we be able to allow an academic researcher to be able to assess a manuscript in 20-30% less time than they're spending at this moment? There's an enormous amount of human labor and time associated with the process. Increasing consistency. So we're looking at extracting similar data, making a similar assessments on the same pieces of research. So structured pieces of content, structured extractions to be able to make an assessment of that manuscript. And then productivity. So can we create a scenario where AI is doing the heavy lifting? It's reducing some of the mundane tasks that should be taken away from humans that can be replaced by AI. And can that allow the same kind of volume of individuals be able to assess a larger number of manuscripts? Alchemist Review itself is made up of 3 bits. My side, which I'll talk about, which this is a manuscript assessment. So this is the textual assessment of the paper, and that's a number of extractions, that's summations, it's structural assessment of the manuscript. The guys at Grounded AI are doing the contextual citation analysis, so they sit alongside us. There's a third aspect in it, which we may or may not get into in the demo. There's an AI chatbot that sits in there, and the AI chatbot allows you to do 2 different things. It allows you to be able to ask questions about the manuscript itself, so you can have a conversation with the manuscript, or you can actually look outside without changing and moving away from the environment and be able to query things like Open Scholar from this position to be able to get an understanding of what the external knowledge is on any specific piece of research. Okay. Like all good things, live demos are always exciting. So I'll start on this tab. And there it goes, loads. So the input of this process is the manuscript file itself. So we're taking in a manuscript file, Word, LaTeX, PDF. We're taking in the metadata. So this is coming into us at submission. So in this case, this is an AIP Advances paper. It's something that we're working alongside AIPP, so American Institute of Physics Publishing, as part of the development group that are looking at this. We're not doing anything specific on the manuscript, so we'll be rendering the original file within this environment. We're not actually doing any sort of file conversions or anything magic from that side. What we are doing is a couple of different things. So the first one is that process of being able to seat a manuscript within a journal. So what type of manuscript is it? So can we classify it? So we're applying a primary and secondary paper type according to the terms and the structure of the journal we're dealing with. We're also taking a general summary. So this is a generalized summary. So if you have a non-expert that needs to be able to assess a manuscript before it's going on to your expert editorial process, this will allow a non-expert to be able to understand. It's also a way of being able to align it back to the scope of the journal if you really want to. Structurally, the other aspects that we're doing. So we're looking and we're rendering the entire manuscript, and we are starting to look at key named entities within the paper. So again, this is structure. Is it right? Is it valid for the venue that it's being submitted to? Is it the right handling editor? Does it have the right components for the area of research that it's been submitted to? We're also then starting to apply the custom taxonomy. So we use AI to actually create custom taxonomies based on a publisher's corpus, and we can be able to apply that directly at the submission stage. Again, this is for citing the manuscript within the journal itself. Following on from that, the next stage is really looking at an editor and looking at having an editor do a review process of that manuscript itself. So there's a couple of different things they might need to be able to do that. The first one is looking and saying, okay, what is the novelty or significance of that piece of research? So there's a couple of different aspects that we use to be able to do that. Advanced Summary is a piece of work that we did, which is called Distill Knowledge, and it's taking a multi-level paper, so it could be 20, 30 pages, 14, whatever it might be, and essentially distilling the understanding. So this is the most entity-dense version of the summary that you could be able to create. It really won't. It's the combination of the full text. It'll do extraction of methodologies. It'll do extraction of key findings, and it will bring it all together in a summary that only really you would need an editorial expert to be able to solve. The other aspect of being able to make that assessment is that we're also extracting the author contributions. So these are the aspects that the authors are asserting that is new, valid, significant about their piece of research. So again, this is trying to get it so that an editor can really be able to assess really what is the value of this manuscript within the field that they're in. Moving from that part, if it is significant, if it is interesting, the next stage is really looking at whether the actual methodologies and the structure of the paper, whether the research was performed in a robust and structured way. So we're extracting the methodologies. We're also not just extracting the methodologies, but giving the contextual assessment. So how were they applied? What were the key extractions from the hypotheses? How was it actually applied? The pieces of research were applied within the paper. Assuming that's all great, and we're starting to be able to have, it's good, it's methodologically sound, it's actually structurally well done, we're starting to actually use some of the deep thinking models. So this is where we're starting to step from structural aspects and assessments and extractions and summarizations, and we're starting to think, okay, how good is this? What can we do? Now, there are some bumper strips on this. So when we first started doing it, it would give recommendations of brand new experimental kind of pieces that would cost millions to be able to do. So essentially, it's been written down to these. Can it give an assessment and some recommendations of improvements of the paper that are within the gift of the authors to be able to make? So that could be methodological kind of tightening of certain different aspects. It might be extra statistical studies that they may want to bring in. It may give, it may, in this case, it's giving a recommendation that it needs to have relevance and contextual assessment association with studies that have fallen before that. It'll do writing quality and readability over the top of it. I won't go into this because otherwise I'm stealing Nick's time. And you will notice that I haven't gone into the citation analysis and I haven't touched on this because this is where I'm going to pass across to Nick.
Excellent. Thanks, Richard. So at Grounded AI, we are in charge of the citation checking aspect of the Alchemist Review product. So before we continue the demo, I just want to intro how we came at this problem and why citations in particular are so important. And then I'm going to just describe the process we have to solve that. And then we'll look at the outputs within the Alchemist Review product and how they address the need that Richard has laid out. So when we started our life, we were building research tools, helping researchers search, summarize, organize information better. And there are lots of tools on the market which do this now, but one of the things we learned during talking to research organizations, institutions, was that actually the need wasn't so much for how can we find the right information. It's actually what information can we trust and what information is credible and what's verifiable. So that gave us the kind of push to pay our attention to how can we validate scholarly content, make sure it's trustworthy. So that's great, but why citations? Well, citations clearly are one of the most important aspects of the sort of scholarly information ecosystem. They're like a currency. But interestingly, citations are actually very overlooked during the peer review process that Rich laid out. And that's for the simple reason that checking citations by hand is just an incredible amount of work. You think there's 50, 100, or several hundred references per manuscript. If you have to go and check that all of those exist and are correctly cited, it's infeasible. And so as a result, it doesn't get the attention it deserves during peer review. And as a result, lots of bad citations make it through to publication, same kind of problem Richard was talking about. So this is why we're focused on citations. So what we've done to address this pressing need for better tools to check citations is we built a system which automates many aspects of the citation checking process, and that platform is called Veracity, and that is what's powering the citation evaluation piece within Alchemist Review. So that's a bit about how we got started and why we do it. So how do we solve this? So our process broadly is in 3 steps: extraction, source finding, and relevance checking. So I think it's key to emphasize, Richard's mentioned that we start with the raw manuscript, right? This is a PDF or a Word document. So this is right from the beginning of the process. And why is this important? Well, actually, there's a lot of solutions on the market to help with checking aspects of citation integrity, but they actually require the existence of some actually pre-built, like structured metadata that would be provided by the author or by the editorial staff. And so we actually save a lot of wasted time by actually using AI to read the raw manuscript directly, extract all the citations and references from the manuscript. So once we've done that, we're going to go and try and find all of the references the author has referred to. So we go out to the wider world, we query third-party databases, we use web search engines, and this allows us to do a few things. It allows us to actually verify that the source exists. And this is becoming of increasing concern for editors of journals because they're getting a lot of AI-generated papers through, right? And they're seeing more and more of these papers, these references, which don't actually seem to go anywhere. They're fake, basically. So we can do that. And it also allows us to check that the metadata of the reference is aligned with that canonical source. And again, this is important because a symptom of improper AI use is more of this sort of garbled metadata. So you get references which look pretty real, but they're like 2 titles mixed together, you know, or the authors are switched around, or the DOI is just completely messed up. So we do that. But finding the source also allows us to do a third and final thing, which is to check the relevance of how that cited source actually aligns with what the author has said. And this allows us to basically give a sort of score to citations and say, okay, these are the ones which are less obviously relevant based on our metrics. So these are the ones we prioritize for editors and peer reviewers. So they basically get sort of a much better bang for their buck when they're reviewing citations. So that's just a bit about our process. Now let's look at the actual outputs. So as you can see, Richard's left us at the digest. So we have this high-level alerts of things that we've picked up with this particular paper. So in this case, there are certain authors which seem to be disproportionately highly cited. In the industry, this is a very common sort of integrity concern, potentially. And we also have the alert that there are some citations which have a particularly low scoring relevance. So those are the 2 things that I'm going to be able to drill into now as I navigate through to the citation evaluation tab. And I'm not going to go through all of these features for the sake of time, but you can see we have a quantified overview of the number of issues. It sort of gives me an idea of the sort of priority level or amount of work I'm going to need to do here. I'm going to go down to the author representation because that's pertinent. You can see we've got an author that's cited very highly, and this is well above the average that we've basically established on all the papers that we've analysed. Some of these high-level statistics and assets, you know, we are focused on quality and integrity here, but we've also heard things like editors saying, well, this is actually really useful for figuring out target audiences and who could be peer reviewers. And so we're finding that there's sort of a lot of sort of ancillary benefits to these assets as we go along, just basically better intelligence around the manuscript and who and what's being cited turns out to be really useful. So as we get to the bottom here, where we can actually drill into the detail. And so we have every single citation that we have extracted from the manuscript and all the checks we've run on that manuscript so that the user, in this case the editor, can basically follow along with our logic and verify what we've done. So I'm going to finish off with this example, and I really like this example because it's a great example of the relevance check. And so the author, this is sort of their first sentence, introductory sentence, talking about fire prevention, fire rescue, and we've been able to find that reference they're referring to, and we've got it linked. But we've been able to basically say that this source that's being cited, this seems to be about fuel consumption measurement, and it's not clear or obvious how that's related to the concepts of fire rescue and fire prevention that are being discussed here. And it may well be that there's a good reason for citing that paper there, but the fact is it's not immediately clear, and so we can prioritize that for editors. So this is basically a whistle-stop tour of the outputs we're generating, and this is all angled towards helping editors get a rapid view of the quality and integrity of the citations within the manuscript, which obviously helps with the augmented review and greater efficiency in the editorial process. So,
thanks very much, Nick and Richard. Have you had feedback on whether the users are enjoying it or finding that it's saving them time or making their lives easier?
So it's in use across 3 publishers, and there's a fourth one just joining at the moment. So we're deep into essentially that analysis. I mean, this goes back to the way of being able to assess value. So right now, the best way of being able to assess value is to put it in the hands of the editors, have them assess the outputs, and then be able to feed back into the system. So we've got that at the moment. They're starting to talk about, potential gains of 10 to 15% being able, as far as time saving for assessment of manuscript. Again, some of it is time saving, and some of it is a risk prevention, right? So the reference checks are just not being done internally. So I think that there's a kind of a double edge on this one. Some of it is really going to be built around efficiency, but some of it is just going to be risk.
Thank you. Any questions? Briefly, we're running a little bit over.
Thanks, Hans. It's great as a point solution. Can you run it through every article that's been published or every paper that's been published this year and work out what proportion are fake or rubbish? Can you do this at scale?
Well, I mean, you might. Do you want to do that for the references, and I'll talk about it from the textual side?
Yeah. It's certainly, I think where we want to get to, right, is running this on every paper that's been published or is being published, but I think the part of your question that makes me consider is knowing whether a paper is rubbish or not, and I think that's really hitting the nail on the head, because we can run our analysis on every paper, and we can generate these insights about who and what's being cited, to what extent, and what kind of clarity of relevance is being used, but that doesn't mean we can conclude that these papers are necessarily bad, or these authors are actually serving their own benefits. So I think our philosophy, as I think Rich sort of laid it out, is that this is really in the hands of the people with the power, the editors in this case, and the peer reviewers to help them decide for themselves whether something is of high enough quality for their specific journal. So yes, but with heavy caveats of who decides what's high quality or not. I think with better benchmarks and agreements are in the community about exactly what kind of standards we expect on these checks, I think we could get to that. But yeah, some thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the textual assessment, because we're essentially running multiple instructions on multiple models, I think it would be impractical to be able to do that extraction, and then we would need experts to make that assessment. I mean, I think that there's some empirical stuff that from the reference side that may be easier to be able to run en masse, but I think we'd find it difficult because we would still need the human assessment of those outputs. So I think it would be relatively difficult to do.
It's a very impressive set of criteria that you use for evaluating the paper, but are you going to do anything about that title, which is hopelessly ungrammatical?
I mean, we can work with only the papers that come to us, I'm afraid. So I mean, we're slightly hamstrung from that.
Have there been any conversations with publishers about making this extra context available on publication?
No, it's but these are ongoing discussions. I mean, this is exactly how we're approaching. There's 2 different really interesting kind of areas of discussion. The first one is obviously a workflow aspect. So where does this get served? How does it get served back into workflows, and etc. The other aspect is what parts of this go into what different use case. So I think that there's aspects that could go into the technical manuscript checks. There's aspects that go into RI checks. There's aspects that could be utilized for identifying peer reviewers. So there's and I think is a really interesting one. Do we want to actually have these outputs as an extra a piece of information over the top of it? Had some interesting conversations with more kind of, I suppose, preprint leaning journals where they're thinking about this as being a part of a transparent process that kind of flows into it, but they've been thinking pre-publication, so preprint, then an assessment, then going into a kind of a transparency, a peer review kind of process. So
thank you very much, Richard, Nick. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So I'd just like to introduce our next speakers from Madison AI. Mark Riley describes himself as an AI optimist and evangelist with a deep understanding of ethical AI adoption for media companies and academic publishers. He runs a boutique consultancy, Madison AI, that advises media execs on how to deploy AI safely, and has built a suite of bespoke AI prototypes that are now live and widely used. So I'll let Mark talk about that. And then Ed is an ML scientist from Worcestershire who's worked on projects ranging from chat GPT detectors to ultra-realistic robotic speech systems. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Cool. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Helen, for inviting us along from Bristol. And thanks, everyone, for coming this evening. My name is Mark Riley. I feel a bit of a fraud talking at an AI for academic publishing event because my background is the grubby world of news publishing. So I'm sorry about that. And also, Mark asked me, he said, the audience likes a bit of humility and lessons learned and things that went wrong. I said, how long have I got? He said, 12 minutes. I said, well, I need about a day to go through all my disasters. So I won't spare you that, but there are lots of lessons we've learned along the way. Mark Riley, I've founded a company called Matheson AI in Bristol in terms of my own AI credentials. So it was about 10 years ago now. I was working for Dow Jones for the Wall Street Journal in New York, and my boss, Will Lewis, asked me to do an AI audit of the company. And I was poking around corners. No one really knew what AI was in those days. So I probably met over 110 AI vendors and startups over the next few years. And often got to the end of the hour-long meeting, had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. So I set about learning and getting better at this. And then I left in pandemic, came back to Bristol, and set up this consultancy, just really helping publishers adopt AI in an ethical and responsible way. There will be a small prize at the end of the talk for anyone that knows where Matheson, the name, comes from. If you can think about it, has anyone got any ideas? Anyway, so I went back to Bristol, I took a sabbatical and studied AI for business at Side Business School, Oxford, and London Business School. And then 2 years ago, I met Ed, my colleague, who's my lead ML ops, loves prototyping. He was written up by the BBC for coming up with a chat GPT detector, which didn't make him entirely popular.
I got a lot of hate mail from my fellow students for that one. It's a lot of fun.
So we do three things really. One is to educate, and we find a lot of clients are still at that end of the maturity, so they're still at the education phase. We run workshops and webinars. We then like to get them to a point where they're prototyping. Before that, ideation. So we'll do the workshops around opportunity spotting and going through that checklist we heard earlier about what works. And then we love to prototype. And Ed is a demon prototyper. So we love to sort of test hypotheses in a safe environment. Did I miss anything about you?
No, I think that's it.
So if you agree with the agenda, we've got 10 minutes. We'll whistle through it. We're going to take a quick holistic view of AI use cases that we're seeing in the market. We'll drill down into media use cases that I've seen at News Corp and publishing companies. And then we'll go into academic publishing use cases. But I think what I was asked to really talk about, so my day job is Matheson, but we have this AI startup on the side called Hannah, which is our own attempt at building a scalable business, which is a newsletter generator. And we'll give you a quick look at that. And I'd love your feedback as beta testers. So just what we're seeing in the market at the moment, I won't go through all of these, but I think the most significant one in terms of societal impacts is going to be healthcare in the long run. And if you ask people, why are we doing this in the first place? I think there's two answers. One is to crack cancer and the other is to crack cold fusion. So healthcare is the one that I'm think is the most meaningful. Finance, there's a lot of black boxes doing algorithmic trading. Robotics, Ed's got a background in robotics as well. Media we'll talk about more in a second. Logistics, sales and marketing is the one that's seeing the most uptake at the moment. If you include customer-facing chatbots, that's where most of the investment's going right now in terms of use case, education, and then legal. And Matheson has been working with some legal companies on contract review. So that's very high level. Now, in terms of what I saw in the newsroom, in my time at Dow Jones, most of the AI is what you call traditional AI or classical AI, or as my colleagues call it, boring AI. So we were looking at grouping and reinforcement learning, mostly around clustering. So we could build an intelligent paywall and we could do churn reduction, that kind of stuff. But now Gen AI has fully moved into the newsroom. Some companies are very fast to adopt, some not so fast. We found 70% of journalists are using AI, but only 20% of that 70% are telling their bosses that they're using AI. So we're seeing that as a kind of theme. But if you think about the journey of a content, when you're doing your research, you're brainstorming, you want to come up with an idea, they're using AI clearly for that. And then Notebook LM is a very popular tool in newsrooms for collaborating around story generation and having multiple documents in one place. Sub-editing, fact-checking, and then CMS integrations so they can build the SEO into the workflow as they're publishing at their desks. And then finally, once they publish, they can use it for social listening, seeing what the impact of the story is. Then finally, analytics. Did the story work? Did it generate any money? Did it drive any subscriptions? What was the ad targeting like? So these are all kind of classical use cases for a story of a journey, from the journey of content, very much from the beginning to the end.
So one of my favorite things about what we do is we do some workshops and we come up with lots of ideas for like how we can help companies. And for a lot of the media and publishing companies, whether they be academic or kind of more traditional media, we find a lot of the use cases end up being very, very similar. So I won't go over some of the ones we've already talked about today, such as like peer review. That's what comes up a lot. People really, really hate doing peer reviews and want a faster way to do it, it seems. But kind of these are some of the other things that are really, really sort of coming up. So web research, obviously, you know, ChatGPT needs to pull all of its answers from somewhere. It's currently mainly pulling them from Reddit and Wikipedia. It might be a little bit better if we got it from proper academic sources instead. That's something they're looking at. That's something that everybody wants. Dynamic content tagging, I think we've already really been over. So let's skip a bunch of these and maybe get to what everyone's interested in, which is profit and paywalls. So this is something that obviously coming from the media industry, it's a lot more cutthroat than the sort of academic publishing industry. So I feel like that's where a lot of our sort of learnings can really come into place there. And one of the things that I think really will start happening within the academic publishing world that has already happened in the media world is they had to pivot their sort of profit strategies. Now, with RAG and the kind of, obviously, OpenAI and all the other companies already have taken most of the data. So it's not a matter of selling it to them again. It's a matter of how can you get compensation for what is already inside these models. And now, luckily, the models like referencing things that they already know. So what we're trying to work on with a couple of different companies, Hum actually included, is better referencing systems. So obviously, how knowledgeable are we on RAG now? So there's the kind of retrieval augmented generation. This is the route that a lot of places is kind of going down to reduce hallucinations. So instead of just telling the model to go crazy and come up with all of its own information, you have a big trusted data source. It pulls information from there and then it generates the answer. But this is a layer where we can have a form of kind of paywall and content attribution. You can directly see what source it's coming from, and then those people can be compensated. No one is really doing it currently, but it's one of the kind of big things that very much is coming in our opinion.
So just very quickly, a couple of prototypes we've had fun with. We've done a complete live transcription of the UK and EU parliaments and committees for a client who traditionally had teams of humans listening to these committee meetings. But now we've built a system where we can transcribe live and put it into a editing suite for them. And it's gone from about 4 days to instant in terms of. Oh, sorry, you're going to do this.
Oh, yeah, and so the other things that we've done, we've AIP, again, we're in partnership with Hum. We've made a nice little RAG system for them, and it's been very useful that Hum has come along, because before that, we were kind of doing a lot of the embeddings ourselves, and that just always creates a kind of, one of the main issues there is getting the data from one party to another. So they've got all of these documents, they don't have a particularly easy way to send it to us, and we wouldn't have a particularly easy way to then embed it and then get it back to them. So one thing that you've always got to be thinking about within the AI world are these data pipelines. It's where is the data currently, where does it need to be, and how can we keep that loop? Because obviously nobody wants outdated data, so it has to be constantly updated. So you've got to be thinking about that the entire time. Oh yeah, so embeddings are, you can think of it as turning words into numbers, because computers are a lot better at dealing with numbers than words. So if we turn one sentence into a number and then another sentence into a number, and they have similar numbers, we know that the concepts themselves might be quite similar, and then you can get quite interesting with how you can play with some of these numbers. So for example, if you take queen and you add man, it might give you a similar number to king. And so this is what we're talking about when we talk about embeddings. It's just turning words into numbers that we can then use for like semantic similarity and whatnot.
And then we did a big chunky piece of work with our partners, Deeper Insights for BBC Studios. The BBC Studios were launching bbc.com, so that's all the website traffic outside of the UK. And none of their content was necessarily in the right shape for content recommendation and ad targeting. So we use AI to do real-time taxonomy, classify for them, and content tagging. And then finally, this is a bit of fun. We did this literally for lols. So I came up with this idea that you could take a photo of your bookshelf or your Kindle, and Ed built this prototype, which will then give you a personality score and tell you what other books you should read. So it gives you book recommendations based on what you've got. I think I came out with an inquisitive philosopher. Please don't look at the books it found. It's quite embarrassing. But shelvedimage.co.uk if you want to take it for a spin. So just a quick kind of canter through Hannah. So Ed and I met, as I said, 18 months, 2 years ago. And I gave Ed this challenge. I said, look, the problem to solve is that local news is broken. The business model is broken. Is AI potentially part of the solution? So seconds later, he built this prototype, which is called Hannah. Essentially, it allows you to feed in a topic, and then it'll generate a retrieval and ranking of best articles it can find with summarizations. So we built it to build a newsletter for Bristol, which is where we're at, and it was very successful at doing this. So we then figured out it can actually work in any topic or B2B scenario. But our golden rule is attribution. So we make sure that the publisher is valued and credited, and all traffic goes back to the source. And also our other golden rule is human in the loop. So we don't publish anything without a human editor checking the fidelity of the summarizations, and also adding some human touch to the newsletter. I think we all know very well if something's been 100% AI generated and it's got no soul. So we keep the human there. And we also like to differentiate ourselves from the semantic AI search engines of the perplexities of this world, because as far as I'm concerned, they're just shoving all the news into a blender and just serving you a smoothie. And we're trying to keep the integrity of the source material in our product. So this is Bristol News by Hannah. It goes out on a Friday. We just launched one in Oxford, goes out on a Thursday. I've also got my AI and media newsletter, goes out on a Tuesday. So it's got the human editorial at the top. It's got data box, which is referencing some interesting data from Bristol that week. Then it's got the hyperlocal news articles. And then it goes into real estate adverts and coming events. Now, that would have taken a team of 2 or 3, a best part of a day to put that together. Me and my editor can do that. We've got it down to about 50 minutes to publish that newsletter. So we've done Bristol, we launched Oxford, we're going to take on the next 10 sort of target cities in the UK. So I'm running an AI consultancy, I'm running a software platform, now started a media business. There's a lot going on. Ed will talk.
Yeah, so here's just a little bit about our sort of retrieval process. So we keep things fairly standard but well tested. So we start with a kind of little web deep dive. So this is finding sort of as many sources as it can from lots of different places. Originally, we were just having the users input their own RSS feeds. So it would be kind of, you can super personalize it to exactly what you want. But then we found that would eventually miss things. So then we thought, why not just combine everything? So you can kind of put the exact sources what you want in, and then you can also do essentially an AI-powered Google search. But the thing is, a lot of people know how to kind of game Google. So you might get some articles coming up that are actually quite bad, but very well SEO'd. That's why we kind of then re-rank it. So then we can the AI can look at it and think, well, that's not actually very relevant to our topic. That's just been well SEO'd. Get rid of that and re-rank it. Then we can also add internal APIs and documents. So we're trying to pivot it slightly towards a sort of more B2B approach. And obviously, if you're doing something like that, you want your own information to be in it. You want your blog post to be coming at the forefront. So that's a really nice kind of integration there to keep the newsletters more business focused, to keep you in your clients' minds. And so the query matching, that is just the kind of re-ranking, and then the aggregation and summarization. So that's the kind of the final part when you hand it to the AI model and you say, hey, give me a summary of this, but in the style of a pirate.
So I'll skip these slides on go-to-market in the interest of time, but my one big lesson from being an entrepreneur launching corporate ventures is that the big mistake entrepreneurs tend to make is they spend 90% of their budget on the tech, and then they've got nothing left for marketing. So my rule of thumb generally is 50% on tech, and then save some firepower for your marketing. But that's the approach we're using. A lot of SEO, a lot of paid search, a lot of earned search, a lot of free search, and social. We're looking for partnerships, and then we're looking at 6 months to be in a good place. And then finally, I'll let Ed talk to this, but the 10x ambition, this is where I see AI going in terms of the content space. At the moment, we're ingesting Google being an archive, and we're looking at all the models, we're model agnostic. But where I think the future of information is going is having multiple sources ingested, both news and financial news, all the models available, and then outputs will be highly personalized to the user experience. And that's where you can start to see personalization at scale. And classically, OpenAI moving on this space very fast.
Yeah, so I think the one bit to really hit with this from as a kind of like learning piece is just how we've tried to sort this initial sort of LLM/AI provider layer before going for anything else, because like we were speaking about earlier. Lots of these models are going to change. They're going to get better. Some of them are going to get worse. One of them might suddenly go defunct. You have to be ready as a business for these sort of challenges and sudden changes. So if you can build your applications with it just being totally interchangeable and you're testing new models every week and they're all working the same way because they're just kind of one piece in the pipeline, it means you have a much more sort of robust application, but also that it can very much improve as the models improve. And that's one of the things that is happening. We're seeing exponential growth within them now. So if you kind of angle yourself and your product to make the most of that growth, that's best of both worlds.
And just another QR code for you. I'll share the slides also. If you want, we've produced a list of all our favorite courses, free and paid, the best AI blogs, podcasts, and newsletters that you can find. But that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's great. So we click on those QR codes to see the newsletters and whatnot. Yeah, very good. Questions?
Very interesting. There's a couple of questions here. How do you deal with the models updating? Because you've got loads of models involved there. But the other one is there's a lot which sort of seems to revolve around broadcast, focusing on a specific interest that somebody wants to push out. How do I, as a user, interact with a system like this and actually get those things I'm interested in and things I don't know that I'm interested in, and not just get completely bored reading the same newsletter every day kind of thing? Yeah,
so you're talking almost about the sort of echo chamber problem of, you're already interested in these. Well, so that's a very hard one to tackle. So what we are mainly focusing now on is just that I know I'm interested in boxing and football. I want to get all of the boxing and football news. And you're right, sometimes that can get a bit samey, but there definitely is a lot of comfort in that as well. It's nice to have something that is always similar. And then on the model provider aspect, there's a couple different ways to do it. So with the kind of OpenAI library, a lot of them have they work to that standard, luckily, which is very, very good for those kind of interchangeabilities. But then also by not using as many abstractions, it helps quite a lot in the kind of, one, the application's actual understanding of it, and two, it's just less things to break. So for example, a lot of people would use things like, say, LangChain in their apps to get it kind of up and running a bit faster. That's just kind of like an abstraction layer. But when you avoid using bits like that, it actually makes your application a bit more kind of not just secure, but also kind of, there's much less parts to break. So it's as long as you know how every one of those model APIs works, you're fine. You don't have to worry about the kind of the layer in between that you're using from some other guy.
Yeah, I call it the serendipity problem. But we don't allow the retrieval to be extreme political one way or the other. So you're going to hopefully get a balanced view theory.
Thank you. Are you being, very interesting, are you being as innovative on monetization as you are on content production?
So we're figuring that out. For the software, it's probably a freemium model. So we'll get the visitors in, get some feedback, and then look to what the features are that they're prepared to pay for. So that's sort of a standard software play. For the newsletters, it's good old fashioned advertising. We'll hopefully get some subscription down the path. But it's like, it's very hard to charge for software at the outset. You just got to get traction and build the audience, and then, as I say, see how you can move them up the value chain. For Hannah.News, the actual platform. No is the short answer.
I was interested in, you mentioned about audience building just then. You mentioned about building audiences.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you'd experimented with any kind of audience building AI tools, like things to generate, find groups of people that have a particular interest in a certain area and use that, sell that to companies who can then approach those audiences with that information. And I mean, I can think of a bunch of problems that could come out of that as well. So just curious if you've experimented with that.
Not so far. I think a couple of kind of approached us with similar ones, but yeah, we have always been a little bit wary of it. But my favorite way to use AI in a kind of audience approach sort of way is a lot of people have kind of spreadsheets of all of their contacts, or like kind of everyone that you know on LinkedIn. One fun thing that you can do now is just put all of those into a sheet, as much data as you can, and then let's make a personalized email for this person, this person, this person, this person. So instead of, it's still spam, but it's slightly nicer spam.
Just on the local newsletter, what's the sources that you look at for that? Because are you looking at local papers or what?
Yeah, so
just talk us to how you've managed to sort of.
We're trying to move away from. We do rely heavily on the local papers. Bristol, for example, gets picked up, and the Nationals will pick up that story. So it's run in the Guardian, often on Sky News, or Yahoo News will pick that up. But then we're going to be quite sort of innovative in the way we're approaching community news and police and crime. So we're taking it straight from the source, from the police websites. University is a good source. We get a lot of university news coming through. Health data, and we're starting to look at putting transcription bots into council meetings. And planning meetings. In the old days, you send a jobber down to go and sit there all day. Now you can put a bot in and turn those meetings into news in a very cost-efficient way. So again, it comes back to solving the local news business model problem. If you can do it that efficiently, you've got a product, in my mind.
Thank you very much. We can continue the conversation over the food, which has just arrived, and the drink. So thank you very much to Mark and to Ed. And thank you very much for coming. Our next Cambridge AI will be actually back in Cambridge on the 26th of June on AI and security/defense. So for anyone who's interested in that, sign up to the meetup group and you'll hear about it. Thank you very much.